Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Maverick Podcast. Some of you probably know me. My friends are probably watching this, but if you don't know me, my name is Kathy Rose and I'm an astrologer. I'm an intuitive person and I am a maverick. And the reason I wanted to start this podcast is because I've lived a maverick life. And I know, when you are a free spirit, when you are highly individualized, sometimes you want to connect with other people that are just like you. But mavericks seem to operate sort of as a tribe of one. There aren't as many communities for mavericks. So my intention with this podcast is to connect us. I am going to be interviewing in each episode other like-minded maverick-oriented people from many different fields. Today, we have a very special guest. I will introduce him in a minute, but sometimes it will be about astrology. Astrology will probably come in every single podcast, honestly, but sometimes it'll be about music or art or psychology. So we're going to have many opportunities to explore this high independence, highly individualized approach to life and the superpower of the maverick individual. So let me begin today. My very first guest for this podcast. This is extremely meaningful to me. It is a person with whom I have great respect and have known for a long time. His name is Pete Sanders. I will invite him on now. He's just waiting on Zoom so he can turn on his camera and his microphone. There he is. Hello, Pete Sanders.
Hi, Kath.
Now
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be your first guest.
The honor is mine. Thank you. So you see his beautiful background. He's actually sitting out on his deck. Pete is in Sedona, Arizona, my favorite place on the earth. And I need to just give them a little bit of sense of who you are and what you're about and why I wanted you to come on. I met Pete in 1983. I was only 24 years old. Pete is the founder of an organization called Free Soul, which is a nonprofit educational program that is designed to teach people to be free spiritually. The concept of Free Soul is to, in my opinion, to teach you to get your own answers, to teach you to be an unlimited, beautiful soul, and to give you some methodology so that you can access that, which I think is phenomenally important. So you came into my life at a very instrumental time. I had just started my astrology practice the spring of 1983, and then I met you in the fall of 83 and became interested in your program, became an instructor, started teaching, so forth and so on. So welcome, Pete.
Thank you. Welcome. And I think the honor really is to all the people who are watching, because as you said, if they're tuned into this, they're mavericks. And part of your doing this is honoring their desire to be pioneers. And pioneering is lonely, but even pioneers got together at the fort every so often for a hoedown and sharing and swapping tales and just fellowship and renewal with kindred spirits. And I think that's what this podcast will be for fellow mavericks out there. So I honor all of them that are joining us, whether I ever meet them in person or not. Thank you again for letting me be a part of this.
Well, let me give you a little background about Pete. He is absolutely, I call him a maverick influencer because he's an MIT graduate in brain science. And he decided, instead of going the pure scientific path, he decided to found this spiritual organization. And one of the things that I find the most spectacular about your motives is this intention you have to keep information affordable, and this intention you have to empower people rather than to have worship or applause, rather than to have devotion. Your intention always was, hey, let me teach you how to get your own answers. You have a direct pipeline to the universe, please use it. So Pete started a course. And initially, oh my God, why can't I remember how many lessons were in that first course, the introductory course? That's so
Well,
funny.
the dynamics of being a free soul course had 10 initial lessons. As we evolved different materials, you and your wonderful videographer husband, Norval, helped us do the Science for Living as a Soul 2 DVD set. So what I've taken to saying is all of our materials represent that science for living as a soul concept. And all of my books, all of my DVDs that people can find at freesoul.net, they all have on them the free soul method. And I've taken to, I think, being a little more articulate than even when you met me, of being clear what I mean by the free soul method. It's not me, Pete Sanders. It's not even Free Soul, the 501c3 nonprofit. It's the ideal that you deserve instruction that sets you free rather than makes you dependent. And a lot of that was from my own background as a seeker. I've been a seeker for 60 years, professional teacher in this field for 50 years on June 1st. And growing up in Southern California, you could find all kinds of woo-woo. And I said, I want to dedicate my life to bringing this out of woo-woo and into wow-wow. And it bothered me that seekers were told that they had to spend a fortune for stuff. I feel this should be public ed. And as you alluded, I did found Free Soul as a 501c3 public ed. But it also disturbed me that people were told, well, you have to leave your religion. You have to be a devotee of a guru just to learn this stuff. And I didn't feel that was right. I feel these are secrets from science for tapping the soul, the psychic senses that are the senses of the soul. And your faith is very personal choice. And now I tell everybody up front, I'm an unabashed fan of Swami Beyondananda, the comedian. He does the lighter side of enlightenment. And one of his shticks is nobody should ever go to a guru unless it's themselves, because if you just spell it slowly, guru is G. You are you. So I've kind of dedicated my life to the following principles. Help people learn how to be their own best teachers so they can incorporate the aspects of their faith, their aspects of their beliefs, and put their own personal touch on it that is uniquely tailored to their soul crystal, to their life purposes. And then always get to the essence of stuff. Try not to get lost in the scenery or the hype, or what's the essence. And in my later years, I haven't been able to travel as much. So instead of me going out and meeting people, I've here in Sedona meet people, and I bring the same approach to Sedona's vortexes. How to do the vortexes inside out, not outside in. Outside in is just hype. Ooh, I want to go to the vortex. Or with the psychic senses, ooh, I want to be psychic. Inside out is saying, what do you need at this point in your life? What vortex site would best assist that? Or what practical purpose to your higher senses? I actually don't believe in ESP. I prefer to say HSP, higher sensory perception. Physical senses are the senses of the body. They work through physical energies. The psychic senses are the senses of the soul. And since superstrings physics says we're all souls, everybody has those senses. They just get no training in them. So my purpose is then, what's the essence of why you want to pursue those skills, so you don't just be destination oriented, you're creating your own enlightenment, you're enjoying the journey of learning as a soul.
Exactly. And it really boils down to the motive to be free, the motive to be able to check any piece of information you get deep within your soul to find out if it resonates with you, to get information directly from the universe. But I want to start with
Can I just say one thing?
Mm-hmm.
Also, that means the freedom to be uncomfortable, because
Yes.
pioneering also involves periods where you feel lost. You don't, fully have the answers. And, the nice thing about pioneering, you're never lost. You're pioneering. But because people haven't been taught that normal progression, there's times when you don't know. You're always allowed to say, I don't know, if you add one word, yet.
Exactly.
And my other work with, how to counter limbic brain, in our evolutionary past, that limbic system of the brain, if you didn't know, you were going to die. Something was going to eat you. So we biologically associate not fully knowing yet with a survival stress. Whereas, and that's why Mavericks have it so tough. When you're surrounded by a lot of people, they go, oh, it's okay, it'll work out. When you're on your own, that not knowing and being alone can really feel scary and empty. And that's something I want to make sure we don't not cover, is that it's okay when you feel that. Remember to tap the soul and know, and this too shall pass. I am going to get my answers. I'm going to pre-peak this valley. So
excellent point.
Thank you for letting me include that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, just today I had a consultation, an astrology consultation with a client who's going through, for those of you who know a little bit about astrology who are listening, she's going through a Neptune transit. And this Neptune transit has changed her energy frequency in a sense. It's like being bathed in a completely different orientation to life. And she's scared, confused, feeling that sense of fogginess. And she started to freak out that I'm doing something wrong. I've lost it. I don't understand how to interpret this information. And I had to have that same conversation with her, which is, it's okay to be learning. You are a learning, growing soul. This is new. You will get the hang of it. Just that moment of permission, just that moment for her to go, oh, it's okay that I don't have this perfectly under my belt at this moment. Change the dynamic considerably. But I want to bring it back.
Especially since she knew you were speaking from experience, that you've been in that place. And, you remember we founded Free Soul on the phrase, make life a quest, not a test. And the more I've dealt later with the limbic brain and how it drags people into suffering and struggle rather than joy and soul, I find quick things that I call momentations instead of meditations. Meditations in the moment. When I start to feel scared or everything you were describing for her, in my mind I go, am I making this test mode survival? How do I make it a quest? I make it a quest by saying, okay, I'm allowed to be pioneering. I'm allowed to be exploring. And see, that brings in the feeling of excitement of exploration challenge rather than fear stress that can actually interfere with somebody's psychic senses or seeing the patterns in their chart.
Exactly. And the other thing I said to her is, what would comfort you in this moment? And that led to a very long conversation. She said, oh my God, I'm 50 some years old and I've never asked myself that question. And then the $1 million question is, why? Why not? Why have you never thought in that way? And she goes, nobody ever modeled comforting to me or even mentioned it. I didn't even know I was supposed to think thoughts like that. And of course, then it's the whole question of should,
and that's limbic brain. See, limbic brain, chapter 1 of my second book, Access Your Brain's Joy Center, is how to trigger mood elevation fibers in the brain that counter limbic. Chapter 2 is 60 pages of all the things that discomfort us, every type of worry, hurt, fear. And the comforting connection technique says, what would comfort you and how can you give it to yourself? And see, that limbic brain that's from our evolutionary past, where we were actually more survivable, miserable, doesn't want you to be comfortable. It wants you to be anxious and going out and gathering extra food for the winter. And so we really don't get any training in how to soothe first, then creatively think and take action. nobody says a quest is easy, but the difference is it's joyous and it's creative rather than struggle feeling behind.
Exactly.
And it's hard. There's so many things you bring up that weave in. I apologize.
Well,
we were going to start with, and we haven't gotten to that, but it's so many things you said. I kind of want to share the Maverick techniques, because I feel it's a triangle. There's insight, methods, techniques, and then practice.
mm-hmm.
And so, I always try and share with people the methods and techniques, those momentations.
Well, it's interesting, as I was preparing for today's podcast, I actually didn't prepare at all, because I heard that you need to come on this podcast multiple times because there's so much to cover. And I'm just assuming you're going to say yes. So, but there's so much to cover that is helpful for people. But I want to begin with one of the first things you said in the introductory lecture I attended back in 1983, back in, I think it was November. And you gave this gigantic introductory lecture because the newspaper had done an article about you talking about this. And then you trained instructors from that, of which I was one. But you began the lecture and you said, how many of you believe you have a soul? Raise your hand. And everybody raised their hand. I didn't, though, because I'm a maverick. And I was going, there's a trick here. I know there is. So, and you said, I don't believe you have a soul. And then everybody gasped. You said, I believe you are a soul and you have a body. Because if you have a soul, then where is it? Is it in your back pocket? Do you keep it in your purse? Where is your soul? When your orientation shifts to I am a soul that has a body, then you connect with your unlimitedness. And so then, of course, I took the instructor training and I started to do the publicity introductory lectures. And I use that very same line because it is extremely effective. But the orientation of I am a soul and I have a body, I think, means so much. And let me link this to astrology for a moment, because the maverick self that I am in astrology is pretty interesting. Recently, I did a lecture and I brought up the fact that in astrology these days, with social media and the ability to Google and the ability to listen to all these podcasts about astrology, people are learning just little snippets and they're not learning a lot of wisdom behind astrology. And people are starting to orient themselves to their charts, just very similar to, am I a body or am I a soul? People, new astrologers are thinking, I am my chart. I am my chart. And I dared as a maverick to say, I am not my chart. I am not my chart. I am a soul who has received an imprint from the planets when I incarnated. But guess what? I've incarnated many times and I've received many imprints. So I am many charts, but I am the same soul. And I dared to say, and it really created a lot of waves. I dared to say, as I grow as a soul, maybe I grow beyond that imprint. As I resolve tensions that may or may not be in my chart, maybe I grow beyond the imprint and I change my chart. And astrologers don't like to think that way because the identification of, I am this little compartmentalized person and I have these limitations and I'm stuck with them. And it's not focused on true soul growth or the identification of who you are, the many layered, beautiful crystal of a soul that you are. So just that concept, I am a soul, I have a body, translated to astrology, I am a soul, I have a temporary imprint from the planets. That is my chart. And it was deeply meaningful to me.
It's one of the very important filters, but what I hear you saying is don't make it a prison. Now,
Exactly.
my part of what I share, the science, when I do scientific vortex information or the actual title, I told them I wouldn't do my first book, You Are Psychic, unless they put in chapter 8 on the soul. And the title of that chapter is You Are a Soul, You Have a Body. superstrings physics says everything exists in 10 or more dimensions. And, PBS show Nova's done multiple shows about superstrings physics. The two best are The Elegant Universe and Fabric of the Cosmos. But the bottom line is science is now saying you're more than just this body. And the way I've always made the analogy simply is most of an iceberg's below the water, only a little sticks above. Turn it upside down. This body is the above the water part of the iceberg. It's real, but there's this huge more. And again, I am not versed in astrology. Kathy's the expert there, so I hope I'm not going to say something totally heretical. But the same way your body exists in those dimensions beyond, the planets exist in those dimensions beyond. Our three-dimensional universe exists in those dimensions beyond. And, the imprint of the chart that Kathy's talking about may be the three-dimensional aspects of that imprint, whereas you as a soul exist in dimensions beyond that contain other lifetimes, other charts, and being able to use that framework to sense beyond with your psychic senses, with your soul senses, the deeper echoes and shadows of your chart doesn't make the three-dimensional part of the chart invalid. It just gives extra depth to it. And that's what I think you were referring to, putting it in my physics superstrings language.
Exactly. And there's free will. And two people may be born in the exact same hospital, the exact same time, in rooms right next to each other, having the same chart. But because they are different souls with different histories and different choices and different accumulated wisdom and free will in this lifetime, they may live that planetary imprint completely differently. There is free will. There's a spectrum of expression. And this is the spiritual part of astrology, the maverick part of me, that is really important to communicate. But now, rather than astrology, I want to bring it back to your book, You Are Psychic, the very first book you came out with. And that was in what, 86? What year was it?
Came out. 89 first came out.
89. Okay.
Before we do that, can I just say your last statement about free will? This is where quest, not test, comes into play. The big brain that's gone into in my second book, Access Your Brain's Joy Center, it's all about you got to get it right for survival. Because in that evolutionary past, if you were wrong, you were dead. Well, when you think of yourself as a soul, bodies can die, souls are eternal. So quest means you're not worried about, am I getting it right, how I'm living my chart? It's what are you learning? What wisdom are you amassing as you pursue what you see as accurate from that part of the 10-dimensional elephant in your chart at the time?
Exactly. That is the most important part. And I bring that into astrology. With any cycle that comes up, what is the learning opportunity and how can you absorb that? And, astrology can get very fatalistic, and people come in believing certain cycles are bad, certain cycles are good, and they project what they believe will happen, and it sets it up, and they forget about the learning opportunity. They forget about what the cycle is all about, which is growing and developing as a soul. But what I wanted to talk about were the 4 psychic senses. And I wanted to talk about your book, You Are Psychic. It's a fabulous book. I highly recommend you check it out. You can order it online. You can go to freesoul.net and check out everything Free Soul has to offer. But that book breaks the 4 psychic.
We don't sell that book at freesoul.net because it's with Simon & Schuster. So they can get it in the local bookstore or as an ebook or as an audible book. Okay. All our other materials are only through freesoul.net.
And it's been translated in several languages. It is all over the world. And what it does is it breaks down those 4 soul senses. Just like we have 5 physical senses, we have 4 soul senses. And the revolutionary concept that Pete brought forward, which was so enormously helpful, is to explain we all have the 4 psychic senses, just like we have the 5 physical senses available to us. And those 4 psychic senses perceive the information that is coming through the other dimensions in specific ways. And everybody has one sense that is their strongest sense, their primary sense. So one of the 4 psychic senses is vision. Pete is a visionary, I'm a visionary, which means psychic vision is our strongest sense, which means we are more prone to getting information as pictures or images, or looking at something and having more information come through what we see. But the other 3 senses, everybody has all 4 of those senses. It's just your primary sense will tend to dominate. Most people think that psychic senses is just one big glob of getting information in an extraordinary way. Most people that I come in contact with think psychic senses are scintillating lights, the hallelujah chorus, that it's got to be some big magnificent thing. And they forget they're using it every day, all the time. It's automatic. They've never been separated from their psychic senses, and that they can learn to turn them on and turn them off on command. Now, that's something in that basic free soul course, the comprehensive course that we taught so much, which is you can learn to activate and turn on that psychic sense, and you can learn to turn it off through those
And
psychic.
the reason is most people think that discovery that's in the book of the psychic reception areas, places in the brain and body where if you focus there, it turns up the volume on those senses. They tend to think, well, the book is all about enhanced sensitivity, but it's also about enhanced protection, because most people walk around just having their senses too open. And when your senses are too open, you can actually get bombarded with stuff you don't need or want. It's like having every radio station playing. So the You Are Psychic book is as much about protection as it is about enhanced sensitivity. But even more important, has on the title, The Free Soul Method. It's about the freedom to sense in the way that is best for you at that time. Most organizations, there tend to be a lot of spiritual teachers who are high vision, like Kathy and I, or high feeling. So many things, they see this, see that, feel this, feel that. And if someone is not high in those, but they're higher in psychic intuition, where they just get things as knowings, they don't see anything, feel anything, hear anything. And those knowings tend to be very fleeting. They're there and gone so rapidly that they think they're wrong, or they're trying to force a picture rather than learn how to trust the knowing and then channel switch to the other senses for double checking. And again, this is all about that third leg of the triangle, practice. And when we don't get taught this in school, but most importantly, what Kathy started off sharing, I want to make sure we're not doing you have this strength as a way to limit you, but that the freedom to be the way that's right for you at the time, because there might be an aspect of your chart or something you're going through that has shadows or ties to previous lives where you were higher in a different sense. Mm-hmm. So maybe for that aspect, it would be better to feel into it or to analyze. The psychic audience isn't just hearing, it's this mental understanding. And people who are high psychic auditory will usually say, oh, I'm not psychic, that's just me talking to myself. But that's the way they work. They kind of echo things off the universe. And so the book is in many ways an exploration into all 4 senses you do have, so that you can use different ones at different times. But I think it's also about the freedom to be the way that's right for you, and to turn the volume up when you want it and turn it down and protect when you need to not be overly open.
So let's be super organized now for people who have not been exposed to this before, because I'm anticipating questions and hearing them even echoing through. And that is, what are those four senses? So vision, which is the ability to get information through pictures or seeing or images or symbols. Prophecy, which you call intuition, but you used to call prophecy, and it's still stuck in my head as psychic prophecy. Prophecy is not about seeing the future per se. The psychic sense of prophecy or intuition is instantaneous knowings, very quick, pop into your head knowingness, nothing to back it up. Feeling would be the physical feeling, actually getting it in your body. And audience would be the psychic sense of hearing it, understanding it. It's language based. Psychic audient people, the words are very important, or the tone of voice. You might get a lot of information just through the tone of voice. You'll pick up more than what the person is saying by hearing it. But it's very language based.
Also hearing between the lines.
Hearing between the lines. And as somebody who's first give vision or using vision a lot, even when I was 6-7 years old, I could see when a person was lying. And I vividly recall my mother, who hated confrontation, my mother who would get along no matter what, never speak up. It was part of her generation. And I would look at someone she was talking to and afterwards say, "Mom, couldn't you tell that person was not telling the truth?" And she'd say, "Hush, hush, don't make waves, don't cause a problem." How did you know that? Because their aura, I wouldn't say the word aura because I didn't know, but they would go fuzzy. It would get blurry. Something wasn't right. I could see it. And I trusted it even as a little kid because no one told me not to. But so a visionary might get information in that way. A feeler might feel that something wasn't flowing right when a person said an untruth, for example. An audient might say it doesn't sound right. And a prophet would say, "I just know something's wrong." But knowing those four senses in that way help people tremendously, because finally, the amount of people I've taught these concepts to over the years, finally they'll say, "Oh my God, I have been using these senses my entire life," but they become so normal. You think it's just part of your 5 physical senses when it's really opening up to so much more. Like a feeler picking up, "This is my son. You've met my son, my wonderful high first and feeling son." He can pick up a watermelon and feel if it's the right watermelon because he needs to touch it. Whereas I would look at the watermelon and go, "Doesn't look right." But he has to touch it. He has to feel it. He has to hold it close to his heart. It's a silly example, but it's the difference. An audience might want to thump it and listen to how it sounds when you thump it and so forth. It makes such a big difference.
Come back to freedom. The freedom to do things in the way that are right for you. Mm-hmm. And that particularly applies to meditation classes or any instruction you receive. The instructor, if they've really stretched themselves, they're going to try and teach to all 4 senses. Well, they're going to try, in my case, use the word sense rather than just see. Mm-hmm. But you have the freedom as a soul to be adapting any meditation you're going through to a way that flows for you. Now, here's the reason that intuition so often is called prophecy. All 4 of the senses can be future sensing, but the others are more readily explainable. Oh, well, I had that tangible feeling something was wrong in the future, or, that was my mind talking to myself, or that vision was me just worrying. But when that knowing comes out of the blue and then it happens, that grabs people's attention. So they tended to associate it just with future sensing, but it can be present also. But people who are high in intuition, because their primary sense is so rapid, they don't do most meditations well because they're too darn slow for them. They do
Exactly.
everything faster, and then they don't stick with the voice of the instructor, and then they feel bad, and then they knock themselves out of the meditation feeling guilty. And they should just know, I got it. I'm going to go ahead to the next step on my own, or I'm going to go do something over here and come back to where, the freedom to do it in the way that's right for you applies to everything like purchasing a new house.
Mm-hmm.
The visual person's going to actually want to see a picture of the house or go to the house and see it. Whereas the feeling person not only isn't going to work just from the picture, they're going to actually want to go in and touch things and feel the vibe in the house, of the previous residents. Whereas a high intuition person, they may just know that's the right house. And then where it really comes in is when you're partnered with somebody who has a different strength, agreeing to, let the other person have their time. If somebody's high intuitional, let their partner go to the house or touch it, feel it, see it, and then come back and, not be, I told you so. I knew it was going to be, but it just, again, comes back to the freedom to use those senses in the way that's right for you for that time and not be limited.
Because you have all four senses. Just like in astrology, we are a composite of all 12 signs. And the risk, and here's the Maverick reaction in me. This is my little soapbox in astrology, but it could also apply to this. The risk is when we compartmentalize. In astrology, what happens, astrologers' brains love to measure and love to compartmentalize and organize information. So what happens so often in astrology is they put people into little bitty pigeonholes, and that's where you're stuck because of your sun sign or moon sign or ascendant or whatever. And they forget that we are this unlimited soul. And it's the same with the four psychic senses. We have all four. And it's called channel switching. That's one of the names of the technique that Pete has in the course, which is so brilliant. Channel switching between all four senses. And when you do that, for example, if you're trying to make a big decision, you start with one sense and then you switch through all four, trying to get information in all four of those modalities, which will confirm and reinforce and echo and make it more clear. But we have all four. We are not limited to only doing it in one way. But along with those four psychic senses and the sense that seems to be strongest for that soul, there are personality traits that are generally connected with them, which is fascinating. And if you're an astrologer and you're listening to this, I can already anticipate what you're thinking right now. The prophetic part of me knows you're saying, how does your chart show your gift order, your psychic gift strength? Well, it doesn't. I don't find there's a correlation between the horoscope and me being able to feel your horoscope shows which one of those four psychic senses is strongest. Drives astrologers crazy if you can't find an explanation. But I feel they're very independent. And I feel all you really need to do is go within and ask yourself, what sense is most comfortable to you? Which one do you resonate with as we describe it? And of course, there are other ways to find that gift order, the free soul first counseling that you offer. We're going to save that for a moment because that is a topic that could be an entire podcast.
Probably, yeah. But let me just say, they're both choice.
Yes.
If you feel as a soul you chose to be born at a certain place, certain time for those astrological aspects, another filter might be your choice of psychic strengths for this lifetime, so that they can be two things that weave together. But let me come back to that. You are a soul. I just want to clarify for people. When I founded Free Soul, we had this 10-lesson course, and that's what Kathy trained in. And I trained instructors around the US for 10 years. Then we took some of the best of that course and put it in the You Are Psychic book. The You Are Psychic book has about 25% of the 10-lesson course in it. And as she alluded to, being a nonprofit organization, I'm always about trying to keep things most financially reasonable for people. So if they say, well, what's my best beginning? Well, get the You Are Psychic book and If you like that, then see about our other materials. We do have the full 10-lesson course as a textbook, as a 24 DVD set, but I always recommend the less expensive materials first. And at freesoul.net, our website, in the upper right menu, there's something that says study order. So if people found out about us from the Your Psyche book, or from my Vortex book, or from my Access Your Brain's Joy Center, it has a recommended way to proceed as options. But what I wanted to share from what you said is, if we're thinking soul, you didn't come to planet Earth to be that chart. You came to planet Earth to learn and experience through the filter of that chart. So don't use the chart as a prison, use it as guiding lights for the learning you came for, which is the most important thing. And that's where you let your intuition and your wisdom flow for putting the pieces together, and where sometimes a quote unquote bad chart time, a Mercury retrograde time, might be one of the opportunities to learn about courage, perseverance, not letting things say no to you, realizing it's a challenging time, and maybe choosing to not have a life-changing surgery at that time or whatever, but not being limited, being a soul, not the physical limitation of body or a chart.
Exactly. Well said. And I want to segue into a few of the basic techniques that are offered in the 10 course, the comprehensive course, and I've taught these techniques now for, let's see, if it was 83, that's what, 37, 38 years through. I teach these basic techniques that Pete offered that are life-changing for people, the best foundational techniques I have ever found. One of them is learning how to be aware of your own aura, your energy field, learning how to cleanse your aura, learning how to charge it, learning how to change the orbiting debris of negativity or stress that can accumulate if you're not aware of your own energy field. Just learning that technique. Pete used to say, if you check your hair and you check your clothes, why don't you check your aura? Why don't you check your energy field? And taking charge of maintaining your own state of mind and creating your own energy field. On my YouTube channel, I recorded an aura cleansing technique. It's modified from the basic one you taught, but of course, that's the Maverick part of me. I found a way to do it that was comfortable. And I recorded it on YouTube as a guided meditation, as a service, totally as a service. I don't get paid for it. I'm not asking for money. But it was a way for me to tell some of my astrology clients, hey, maybe you need to start cleansing your aura, building your energy field up so that you can consolidate and refresh your state of mind. And you can go to YouTube, you can do the guided meditation. And
let me just quickly say, bravo, and I want to encourage people to do that, because one of the reasons we self-published all our other materials is the publisher dictated content to me. And one of the things that made me leave out of the Your Psyche book was protection techniques. If we talk aura protection and stuff, we're going to have lawyers and disclaimers. And we did put on freesoul.net several different free videos, the soul shift, how to tap the soul. But go to Kathy's YouTube channel for the cleansing technique, because it's not in the Your Psyche book, and it's definitely something that's valuable to have.
And we need to say, what are we trying to protect ourselves, from what? And really, it is not so much protecting ourselves from bad energy out there. And I say that because I have a lot of people who say, I am so sensitive, I'm afraid of bad energy, so I can't go out in the world. And that's unfortunate. But really, cleansing your aura is learning to take charge of your energy pattern and to fill it with the calm or dynamic or whatever type of energy you want to fill it, because that aura operates as a filter. It filters out the excessive psychic pollution out there. And when your aura becomes highly polluted, full of stress, full of all the bits and pieces of life that glom onto us from our days, we don't get as clear information through our psychic senses. So if you want to be more intuitive, if you want to get clearer information, it starts with that cleansed aura. Absolutely, first and foremost, always, always, always. I actually have had people in the White House who have done that aura cleansing technique. I've had people all over the world who have contacted me and said, oh my God, I wish I had learned this 20 years ago. And for that, I am extremely proud and happy and fulfilled if one person learns a technique that helps to set themselves free. And I've always said, change the technique. Don't be dependent on the recording. Learn to do it yourself, because if you are dependent on the recording, you can't do it when you're in the middle of a restaurant. You can't. You need to learn to find many different ways to cleanse your aura so that you can do it quickly. But it's a start.
I want to just add, people frequently say, but will this limit my sensitivity?
Mm-hmm.
And the analogy I use is, no, you can have your windows open, but put a bug screen in the window. So you're not letting the bugs in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where this matches with my second book, The Access Your Brain's Joy Center, is it's not so much bad, negative things, but the people around us, they're having their limbic stresses. They're being triggered in worries and fears. And if you're overly open to that, you can be taking on somebody else's worry and fear, and it's triggering you limbically and cutting you off from your higher creativity, your higher psychic senses. So, it's about the freedom to be operating from your life's perspective, not someone else's trauma.
There's another part of this that I find very interesting, and that is when you find especially a male, but also a female, whose highest or strongest sense is audience, psychic audience, which is interpreting the intuitive information as a word or language or a thought,
or mental understanding,
or mental understanding. The other key personality trait, the energetic trait that seems to flow with high audience people, is that they're very good at broadcasting. They have very strong auras. One of the techniques that I used to teach in the introductory lectures was quickly how to be able to see, feel, or interpret an aura. And I would teach that in the very beginning, just like you did back in the introductory lecture times. Well, I would always scan the audience to pick an audient person. I would pick somebody high in psychic hearing from the audience and bring them up and say, we're going to practice seeing, feeling, or sensing this aura. And I did that strategically because it is much easier to feel or sense or see somebody who has psychic audience as their first sense, because their aura is strong, bright, powerful, dynamic, and they're also very good at broadcasting. So here's my point. When you get somebody who's high in psychic audience, when it is time for them to speak up, maybe even confront, or even just discuss, their energy imprint is powerful. They broadcast with intensity. Now, if you get somebody who's very sensitive, like somebody high in psychic feeling, or if we speak astrology, somebody who has a strong Neptunian signature in their chart, maybe Neptune's on an angle, maybe Neptune is conjunct their sun, and they have strong, strong sensitivity, that person with that strong audient component can blow them away. And they feel the broadcast, and it's too strong sometimes. So learning to cleanse your aura and put up a boundary and put up a slight shield doesn't keep the information out, but it gives you a layer so that it doesn't come all the way through and take over. And this is where I tell people who are highly empathic. I get a lot of astrology clients, and they usually have a Neptunian signature, who are very, very, very empathic. and they end up becoming victimized by their own sensitivity. And I have so many women who will say, I can't go out in public because I feel everything in the world. I pick up on everything. I absorb everything. So I can't function in the world. And I always say, it's a shame that your own sensitivity is victimizing you to the point where you can't function. Cleansing the aura is the first step. And learning one of the things you teach, which is be able to turn the sense on and turn it off. I mean, there's a whole discussion just with that. But it is understanding each sense has a different personality signature, different frequency to it.
Let me share some of those things I've been developing more recently that I call momentations. Some are old, some are new, that are practical things. This is an adaptation of the aura cleansing. When I found I was in high bombardment environments, I grew up as a kid 3 through 10 in West Side Story part of New York City, but I wasn't psychically open. Going back to deal with publishers when I was more psychically open was like taking a psychic beating in that New York City environment. And I found if, in addition to cleansing, the technique you can watch on Kathy's YouTube, if I pictured my aura as a diamond shape rather than spherical, it's like it helped things deflect off. I jokingly call it stealth aura technology. Or if someone has to deal with someone who's a high broadcaster, and you don't want to be overpowered, and you also don't want to offend them, but they don't know how to tone down, don't face them. Turn sideways. Turn your head so you're giving them eye contact. But the feeling psychic reception area is the solar plexus at the front. So if you turn sideways, that energy goes by and doesn't hit you as strongly. So, learning tips, this is all about learning what works for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great point to bring that up. The psychic reception area for feeling in the solar plexus. And for example, how many children who are very high in psychic feeling, when there's something they're upset about, will say, I have a tummy ache. My son, my Pisces son, who is 27 years old, I always knew he'd say, my stomach hurts today. And I knew that was, okay, what's going on? It wasn't necessarily he was ill. It was, he was upset about something and he was overwhelmed by psychic feeling. My daughter would never, ever say that. She's a visionary type, but my son was all feeling all the time and still is. Yeah. It's important to know that with your children too. And then there's just the personality trait that I love the most about people high in prophecy, because the other gift I use very strongly is prophecy or intuition, which is knowing when you have other people who are friends who are also high in prophecy. You get two people who are high in prophecy talking, and you get a lot of abbreviated sentences because they're nodding their head, knowing what the other person is saying without requiring them to say the whole sentence. And it's just fabulous because it's like, I know. So I just said it.
And an interesting sidelight is those two people don't get offended that the other person is cutting them off.
Exactly.
But if a high intuition prophecy person is talking to a high audience person who, let me finish my exact full words, stop interrupting me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the high intuition person goes, but I already know how you're going to finish. Let's save time.
Or
so just understand that
or
can
if
help.
Or if the intuition person expects the other person to know what they're saying and can't come up with the right word. I have that with my husband quite often. I don't even think he has prophecy. He's very high in other gifts. But when I say, you know what I mean, that over there, he'll go, say the words. I need to hear the words. It's like, oh God,
Well, that's in the You Are Psychic book. It starts with the chapters on each of the 4 psychic senses. But I insisted that they put in at the end of each chapter the strengths and weaknesses of each gift and some of the characteristics. So that can also help you with your loved ones. So you realize being that way, not to be against you, but to be for what they need.
Yeah, exactly.
And that can, again, help us not villainize our partners, be more understanding. It's just something that can add to living together as souls.
Yeah, and being free, being strong, being unlimited. And again, so the way this ties into the Maverick podcast, and this is what I wanted to really focus on the most, and we haven't really gotten there yet, so let me just lightly touch on it, which is if you develop the Maverick mentality, the free spirit, the free soul, then you know any bit of information you come across in the world, whether it's something a doctor has told you, whether it's a religious idea, whatever it happens to be, you know you have the ability to run it through your own system and check to see how appropriate or how important that is for you. You have a direct channel to get that information. And I find so often these days, people never do that. I mean, there are a lot of people I say, well, how do you feel about this? What do you think? And they will defer to, well, this is what I was told to do, so I have to do it, without checking, without questioning. See, I go back to when I was a child. We were raised Lutheran. It was very important to my mom. And from day one, I would sit and I would watch the pastor's aura while he would speak, and I would seek him out. I mean, he would see me coming and he would run after a while because I was always in his office asking questions. What about this? What about that? Well, if God said this, then what about that? And one of the questions I always asked is, why can't I be a pastor? Of course, at that time, women couldn't be pastors. And he never had a good answer, but I always questioned the pastor, always. And I questioned the Bible, and I questioned religion in general. I questioned the rules. And I never got a satisfactory answer from him, although he was very loving and he tried hard. But my mom had a fit. You don't question authority figures. You listen. There are rules you follow. And I always said, why? Don't ask me why. I just told you there are rules to follow. But why do we follow rules? So, the question, the Maverick part of me always wanted to know why, and always wanted to go to my own soul to find the answer. It was natural. In the Maverick orientation, that tends to be natural. But that's the very thing that you teach with specific techniques, how you can do that, and then encouraging people to develop it in their own
I
way.
just want to say the techniques are a framework, and just as Kathy has done, adapt them in a way that works best for you. And that Maverick mentality extends across all fields. Einstein was quoted as saying, it's not knowing the answers that's important, it's knowing the questions. And my actual studies at MIT were biomedical chemistry and brain science. So with a chemistry nerd background, I've taken questions and made it into quest ions. When you're questioning, you're in quest mode. Some quest ions are positive. I'm looking to explore something new. Some quest ions are negative. I feel lost. I don't know, but they're equally valuable because sometimes our biggest insights come from when we don't know, when we feel lost. That's when we're doing real pioneering.
Well, I did a lecture
doing the Maverick podcast and encourage people to know they're not alone, that it's okay, and to cherish that part of them that is willing to question.
Exactly.
That is willing to rise above just the foundation of information and knowledge, to explore how to create their own enlightenment, their own wisdom.
I did a lecture once in astrology that I felt was one of my best because it was meaningful to me. And part of the title came from one of the Free Soul retreats years ago from Scott Maley, when he said, look at life through wise eyes. And you interpreted that as WHYS, but also WISE. So the name of the lecture I did is When Wise Become Wise. and it was about astrology. And one of my first premises is, rather than just interpreting your horoscope, why don't you say, why do I have this particular horoscope? If you have a planet in your chart conjunct your ascendant, why do I have my ascendant so highlighted? The ascendant in astrology is the identity. Why does my soul need the ascendant so highlighted in this lifetime? When wise become wise. And I think that's a way of going through life. The wisdom of asking why, questioning, interpreting rules, not just necessarily taking tradition for the sake of tradition. And I'm not talking anarchy. I'm just saying being a free soul, being an independent soul.
And honoring what you notice. In science, we know there are 1 million bits of sensory data that we're actually receiving every second, but not paying attention to. They're kind of being filtered out. Why is your attention being drawn to a certain part of your chart?
Mm-hmm.
Or why is that question coming to mind? Assume that question is a questing of the soul. It's a thirsting for exploration in that area. That there's something about exploring in that area that's going to provide building material that will help you complete your next level.
Exactly. And it all goes back to, I am a soul and I have a chart. And this chart is temporary. And when I grow, maybe I grow outside of those influences somewhat. That's the maverick astrologer within me. I want to end this with just one thing, which is something you said, I don't know when it was, maybe 10 years ago. I can't remember. It was a retreat I came to in Sedona. And you talked about cowboy wisdom. And you talked about ride for the brand. And I loved it because ride for the brand, but first you have to figure out, what is your brand? And I perceive with you, your brand really is teaching freedom, but your brand is also humility and service with capital letters, to be of service, to be a catalyst pioneer. And I think you have held true to those motives. It's been my pleasure to watch that and feel that you haven't gotten caught up in ego. You did not get caught up in money or valuing how successful Free Soul is based on how much money is being made. It is ride for the brand, and the brand that you resonate with is service and freedom. And for that, I respect you deeply. And you've helped to be a catalyst for so many people. And then they become catalysts for others. And it's this wave of beautiful maverick energy flowing. So
well, thank you for that. And I'll say that if you see that in me, you have that in you. You have those ideals and energies within you. I do want to let people know, I think it's Cowboy Wisdom is an actual book by a great guy who was a Wall Streeter and then moved out west and just put some simple principles. And the other one I like is never cut what you can untie.
Mm-hmm.
And so often people don't even just do that with their relationships. They do that to themselves of, I was wrong. Well, no, just reweave.
Mm-hmm.
But part of growing is reweaving and building on things. So,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it's an honor to be a part of this. And thank you for reflecting some of those same ideals you see in me, in your work over decades, and in the idea behind this podcast.
You're welcome.
Until we meet all the other Mavericks out there, know that you're loved and special.
Thank you. And I see the sun is getting ready to just really beat on you because you're sitting outside. So it's probably a good time to say bye-bye, and we'll meet again. And thank you so much for your contribution today.
Till next time.
Okay. Bye to all. Remember to check out freesoul.net and all of his books, You Are Psychic, and access the Joy's Brain Center. And he also has a book out on vortexes, scientific. I gave the book away. I give away all the books as gifts. What is the exact title?
Scientific Vortex Information.
Yes.
And then our most advanced training, the DVD set that Kathy and her husband helped us do, Science for Living as a Soul.
Yes. There you go. Okay. Bye for now, everybody.